Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to Government House. My name is Hugh Borroman. I have the honour to be the Governor's Official Secretary and I will be the MC this afternoon. Before we start, can I also please take this opportunity to invite you to join me in thanking the Band of the Australian Army for support to our service today. I will now announce the arrival of the official party. The Honourable Peter Malinauskas, MP, Premier of South Australia. The Honourable Stephen Wade, MLC, representing the Leader of the Opposition. Lieutenant Commander Benjamin Robertson, RAN, representing the Commanding Officer, HMAS Encounter. Major Bradley Northrop, representing the Australian Army Representative, South Australia. Group Captain Simon Bird, representing the Senior Australian Defence Force Officer, Edinburgh. Assistant Commissioner Scott Duval, APM, representing the Commissioner of Police, and Mr Tony Metcalf, OAM, State Chairman of the Order of Australia Association. Can I also take this opportunity to acknowledge the presence of the former Premier, the Honourable Jay Weatherill. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the second of 6 ceremonies to present Australian honours, most of which were announced on the Queen's birthday in June, and which now take place in the shadow of her sad passing. Condolence books are available in this room after the ceremony. If you are able, please be upstanding for the arrival of Her Excellency the Governor and Mr Bunton. Please remain standing for the playing of the Vice-Regal Salute and then for 1 minute's silence to honour the memory of Her late Majesty and to reflect upon her life of service. Her Excellency the Governor of South Australia, the Honourable Francis Adamson, AC, and Mr Rod Bunton. Please be seated.
Gana Borgana Alia, Gana Miana Alia, Yaichimiana Alia, Kumatana Yartananku. I acknowledge that we're meeting today to hold this investiture ceremony on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and I pay my respects to the elders. We have just observed a minute's silence in remembrance of and in honour of Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. In other parts of the House, condolence books are open. South Australians are coming to sign them. I just saw a group of school children coming to do the same just before we started. Floral tributes are being laid. It is a sad time, but a time during which we think foremost of Her Majesty's lifetime of service. And the recognition of service was something that was very important to her, just as it is important to us today. And I too would like to acknowledge the presence of the Premier, the Honourable Peter Malinauskas, MP, the Honourable Stephen Wade, representing the Leader of the Opposition. It's always wonderful to have representatives of the Service Chiefs and SA Police, and of course to have all of you join us. Awards in the Order of Australia are announced twice a year on Australia's National Day and on, up until now at least, on the Queen's birthday holiday. And in future, I expect they'll be announced on the King's birthday. They are, of course, awards which recognise outstanding service or exceptional achievement. And there's something quite extraordinary about them, I think. And of course, I have the immense privilege, really, with Rod, of presiding over investiture ceremonies twice a year. And we have, and you will have today also, a sense of not only individual service, but of collective service, and of how well our state and our communities within it, and indeed our nation, are served through your service. I want to congratulate those who are receiving awards today. I acknowledge also that part of what makes it extraordinary is that many of you, almost all of you actually, you don't seek recognition. You are often very surprised, even though you often have an inkling it might be coming, you're often surprised to see your names on that list. So please let me thank you on behalf of all South Australians for your outstanding service and your exceptional achievements. Now, to those of you who are here in support, you're typically here because you are the ones who have provided most support. You're the ones who we are investing love and want to be here on this very special occasion. And we certainly want you, even those of you who are here for the very first time, to enjoy today, to feel comfortable in Government House. It is a house for all South Australians, and we're delighted that so many are choosing to come here for a wide variety of reasons. The final point I'd make is simply that we're here today for each of you because another Australian saw something in your service which they regarded as exceptional, and they nominated you. So I encourage everyone here today, please, to consider nominating others so that their outstanding service and exceptional achievement too can be recognised, and they can come here for similar investiture ceremonies in future. Official Secretary, over to you.
The following appointments to Member of the Order of Australia in the General Division have been made. Mr. Bradley Wayne Chilcott is recognised for significant service to asylum seekers and refugees and to the multicultural community. For much of his adult life, Mr. Chilcott has worked tirelessly for the migrant and multicultural community, among other social causes. In 2011, he founded the non-partisan movement and organisation Welcoming Australia. He is now its director and sits on the advisory board. Mr. Chilcott has held a range of board and executive positions, including board member of Reconciliation South Australia, member of the advisory board Food for Education Kenya, and People of Australia Ambassador, Australian Multicultural Council. He is a former Executive Director of White Ribbon Australia and former Interim Chief Executive Officer, Australians for Mental Health. He was the founding convener of the Family and Domestic Violence Advocacy Network. In 2014, Mr. Chilcott was named Citizen of the Year, City of Charles Sturt. That same year, he won an award for Muslim and non-Muslim understanding from the International Centre for Muslim and Non-Muslim Understanding and the Australia Day Council. Mr. Bradley Wayne Chilcott. Dr. Jeremy Wilfred Leach is recognised for significant service to the forestry industry, to tertiary education and to the community. In 1959, Dr. Leach joined Forestry SA as a state government cadet. He spent 36 years in the organisation. During this time, his love for forestry sent him to far corners of the world with the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. Being closely involved with Forestry Australia for over 20 years, Dr. Leach was the nation's chosen representative for the International Valuation Standards Council, as well as joint editor of the Australian Forest Valuation Standard, among other roles. In 2021, Dr. Leach won the N.W. Jolly Medal, Australia's most prestigious honour in forestry, the most recent in a string of awards acknowledging his contributions across forest management. He remains a leading voice on behalf of Australia's 134 million hectares of forest. Dr. Jeremy Wilfred Leach. Your Excellency, the Medal in the Order of Australia has been awarded to the following recipients. Mr. Graham Dean Carter is recognised for service to the community of Mount Gambier. Mr. Carter has been a passionate advocate for country communities for more than half a century, starting at the age of 17 when he helped his father with the Lucindale District Ambulance Service. In 1974, Mr. Carter founded the Lions Club of Lucindale, remaining there for 15 years in various roles, including president. After moving to Mount Gambier in 2001, he joined the Mount Gambier Lions Club and quickly advanced to chairman and president. Mr. Carter's dedicated service to Lions saw him bestowed with the service group's highest honour, the Melvyn Jones Fellowship Award. He was a founding member of the Stand Like Stone Foundation, a highly successful charity which provides grants to charitable projects in the Limestone Coast. Mr. Carter has also served as treasurer of the Mount Gambier Men's Shed and the Mount Gambier Shows Society. Mr. Graham Dean Carter. Mr. Giuseppe Capuotto is recognised for service to the Italian community of South Australia. Since migrating to Australia from Italy in 1954, Mr. Capuotto has dedicated his life to supporting services for the social integration and inclusion of members of the Italian community. For more than 3 decades, he served on the executive of the Federation of the Association of Campanian Emigrants in South Australia, including 33 years as secretary. Mr. Capuotto has been instrumental in promoting Italian language, culture and religion through his long-time service to the Padre Pio Association, the Dante Alighieri Society of South Australia and the Holy Rosary Catholic Church Prospect. In 1976, Mr. Capuotto joined Radio Italiana 531 as a volunteer radio broadcaster, and since that time has continued to host a radio program in Italian every Tuesday morning. At the age of 92, Mr. Capuotto is still active in supporting the Italian community, having established the Campbelltown Choir, comprised of residents from the Bene Aged Care Centre. Mr. Giuseppe Capuotto. Mrs. Pauline Elizabeth Kenny is recognised for service to primary education. Mrs. Kenny started her education journey as a young working mother by delivering religious classes at Stradbroke Park School in Adelaide. When her eldest daughter started school, Mrs. Kenny became a member of the St Joseph's Primary School Mothers Group in Hectorville and a founder of its school sports committee. Mrs. Kenny achieved teacher registration in 1976 and just 8 years later was appointed principal of the St Joseph's Memorial School in Norwood. She was then a principal at St John the Baptist Catholic School for 10 years before moving to Mount Gambier to take a principal role at St Paul's Primary School. Mrs. Kenny was an integral part of St Paul's merger with Mount Gambier's Tennyson Woods College and in 2017 received the school's Shining Light Award for her service to education. In addition to her work in the classroom, Mrs. Kenny was a co-founder of the Sunset Community Kitchen, which provides free meals for Mount Gambier residents in need. Mrs. Pauline Elizabeth Kenny. Ms. Helena Kyriazopoulos is recognised for service to the multicultural community of South Australia. Ms. Kyriazopoulos has been a strong and important advocate for culturally and linguistic diverse communities with an emphasis on disability rights, the aged and their carers. For more than 20 years, she was an integral part of Alzheimer's Australia, including serving as the Access and Equity Unit Coordinator and the Secretariat for Alzheimer's Australia National Cross-Cultural Dementia Network. Ms. Kyriazopoulos has also undertaken social research in the areas of culturally and linguistically diverse communities, contributing to journal articles, and has published works focused on carer and ageing needs. In addition to serving as the Chief Executive Officer of the Multicultural Communities Council of South Australia, Ms. Kyriazopoulos currently sits on numerous boards, including the Council of Ageing, the Aged Rights Advocacy Service, and Mental Health Foundation Australia. Ms. Kyriazopoulos has been a member of the Australian Multicultural Council since 2014 and serves as a judge on the Governor's Multicultural Awards Board. Ms. Helena Kyriazopoulos. Mr. Ferdinando Francesco Manno is recognised for service to veterans. Mr. Manno was selected for national service when his birth date, October the 14th, 1947, was drawn in the 6th National Service Ballot held on September the 8th, 1967. He was conscripted to the Australian Army's 8th Battalion, Royal Australian Regiment, and served 12 months in South Vietnam during Australia's involvement in the Vietnam War. After his return from active service in 1970, Mr. Manno has continued to serve our country through his involvement with the Vietnam Veterans Association of Australia, South Australia. Mr. Manno provided crucial support for Vietnam veterans as a pension and welfare officer and continues to advocate for the rights of returned servicemen and women as a case officer. He has helped countless students gain a deeper understanding of Australia's involvement in the Vietnam War and the effect of the conflict on veterans through a long-running education program. Mr. Manno has been a member of the Royal Australian Regiment Association South Australia's founding committee for more than 30 years and has served as the 8th Battalion Secretary since 2014. Mr. Ferdinando Francesco Manno. Mr. Anthony John Mogridge is recognised for service to veterans and their families. Mr. Mogridge has been an active member of the Blackwood and Districts sub-branch Returned and Services League of Australia since the 1970s, including 3 terms as president. He is currently Vice President of the Totally and Permanently Incapacitated Association of South Australia and former President of the National Association. The decorated Vietnam War veteran served in the Australian Army from 1957 to 1985, receiving recognition including a Defence Force Services Medal with first and second clasps, an Australian Service Medal with clasp Southeast Asia, Malaysia and Vietnam, and a General Service Medal with clasp Borneo. He is also a recipient of the Republic of Vietnam Cross of Gallantry with Palm Unit Citation and the United States of America Meritorious Unit Citation. On top of his commitment to veterans and their families, Mr. Mogridge has been a passionate supporter of the Operation Flinders Foundation and a councillor for the City of Mitcham. Mr. Anthony John Mogridge. Ms. Teresa Novak is recognised for service to the multicultural community of South Australia. Ms. Novak migrated to South Australia in 1964 as a teenager from Poland under the Family Reunion Scheme and experienced significant culture shock on her arrival. She thus went on to dedicate her adult life to supporting her local multicultural community in Whyalla, as well as the broader state, culminating in her appointment as Commissioner of the South Australian Multicultural and Ethnic Affairs Commission from 2013 to 2018. Ms. Novak is a member of the Filipino Cultural Association of Whyalla, the Club Italico and the Croatian Social and Football Club, and a former member of the Migrant Women's Lobby Group of South Australia. She has sat on the Management Committee of the Whyalla Migrant and Ethnic Communities Centre and is a former member of the Regional Multicultural Communities Network, Migrant Resource Centre of South Australia. Ms. Novak also volunteers with the St Vincent de Paul's Society. She was inducted into the South Australian Women's Honour Roll in 2001 and named Whyalla Citizen of the Year in 2002. Ms. Teresa Novak. Mr. Russell John Nuskey is recognised for service to the community of Murray Bridge. Mr. Nuskey dedicated 60 years of his life to volunteer work as a paramedic, church elder, prison inspector and Justice of the Peace, amongst other roles. He moved with his family to Jervois 43 years ago to be closer to Adelaide after his youngest daughter was diagnosed with spina bifida. Since then, he has been a stalwart of the Murray Bridge community. Mr. Nuskey's volunteer work started with St John, starting in Millicent in 1962, and led to his appointment as Divisional Superintendent at Tailem Bend. As President of the Jervois Hall Management Committee for some 20 years, he has been heavily involved in efforts to refurbish and preserve the community hub. He is a life member of the Royal Association of Justices of South Australia and a member of the SA Health's Murray Bridge Soldiers Memorial Hospital Health Advisory Council. In 1998, the rural city of Murray Bridge named him as its Australia Day Citizen of the Year. Mr. Russell John Nuskey. The late Mr. Jack Renton Thomas is recognised for service to veterans and their families. Mr. Andrew Thomas, son of the late Mr. Thomas, will accept this award on behalf of his family. Mr. Thomas was taken prisoner of war in Java in 1942 and survived the notorious Burma-Thailand Railway. On his return, he was active in ex-service organisations and supported veterans in a range of ways, including as an historian for the 2nd 3rd Machine Gun Battalion Association and the Ex-Prisoners of War Association. He was a keen writer and contributed to several books about World War II, including the biography of his commanding officer and Gallipoli veteran, Brigadier Arthur Blackburn, VC. Mr. Thomas took part in several anniversary of victory in the Pacific Days, would recite the ode at veterans' events, and helped fundraise for vulnerable youth at risk. Mr. Thomas made 4 trips back to the site of the Burma-Thailand Railway. In 2013, he visited as a member of a selected ex-POW group for an Anzac Day dawn service at Konyu. He was a life member of the Legacy Club of South Australia and Broken Hill and a staunch advocate for war widows. The late Mr. Jack Renton Thomas. Mr. Walter James Trenorden is recognised for service to veterans and their families. More than 50 years ago, Mr. Trenorden spent a year with the United Nations Peacekeeping Force in Cyprus, in a mission that still exists today. The former police officer is a member of SA Peacekeepers and a past president and life member of the police sub-branch of the Returned and Services League of Australia. Mr. Trenorden has been a member of the South Australian and Northern Territory branches of the RSL since his return from Cyprus in 1970. He has chaired the Hospital Visiting Committee and been a member of the Ethics Committee of those branches. He is a former coordinator for the Field of Remembrance and currently fundraises for the Welfare Fund. In 2020, Mr. Trenorden was a recipient of the Australia Day Medallion. Mr. Walter James Trenorden. Your Excellency, that concludes the presentations for this afternoon.